There have been plenty of logical inconsistencies and remarkably stupid moments this season, but it wasn't until the season finale that a scene was presented that was so ridiculous, so unbelievably bad, that I felt compelled to talk about it. Now first, some backstory. I'm not just a book reader being hypercritical of the show, although I'm not quite sure why the term book reader is now seen as a bad thing. I've read the first book and I'm now about to start the second, but I have not read the whole series yet, and as such I won't be talking about this subject from the perspective of someone who has. I am simply offering my perspective, the perspective of someone that has watched the show from the beginning and has noticed the growing lapses in logic and the rapid downward slide in the show's quality. I'm sure you've guessed from the title of the video, the scene I mentioned earlier is in fact the trial and death of Petyr Baelish, aka Littlefinger. After 7 seasons as a major player in the series, Littlefinger was killed off in one of the worst death scenes in the history of the show. This has become a crutch for the writers over the course of the last 3 seasons. They realized that with the show coming to a close in season 8, they needed to wrap up many of the hanging threads, and the easiest way to do that is to just kill off those characters. They know people really like it, or at least get excited and post awful, cringe-inducing, over-the-top, fake, garbage-ass reaction videos when they kill main characters.
I have crippling depression.
So it was like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And they started doing it like crazy, regardless of whether it was satisfying or not.
And weak men will never rule Dorne again.
How could you have done this? Jim!
But with Littlefinger's death, it seemed like the writers thought they had something greater than that. And while it was obvious they had nothing left for the character and wanted to kill him off to wrap up his story, it seems like they thought they needed a clever scene for him to go out on. It was almost like they knew people had figured out their crutch of killing people off as a way of wrapping things up, and rather than come up with something different or be creative, they chose to try and disguise the crutch in a ludicrous and terrible trial scene. But before we get too deep into this,
That's what she said.
let's break it down piece by awful, intelligence-insulting piece.
My sister asked you a question.
Number 1. The setup. I'm not going to explain the entire show backstory to Littlefinger leading up to his death. If you've watched the video this far, the chances are you've seen the show and know what he's done. But to give context to his death, we need to go back in time just a little bit. Right around season 5, when Littlefinger dropped off Sansa to be married off to and looked after by the Boltons, or more specifically, Ramsay Bolton, the show ran out of things for Littlefinger to do. He had facilitated the death of King Joffrey and become a lord, and was basically controlling the Vale in Sweet Robin's stead. He meandered for a while until it was time for the Battle of the Bastards, where he sent the Vale army to bail out Jon and Sansa, and help win the battle for the Starks and their loyalists. Once the battle was over, Littlefinger's usefulness to the show was apparently over. In season 7, he does virtually nothing other than stir up shit between Sansa and her sister Arya before being brutally murdered. Littlefinger started the War of the Five Kings, turned the Starks and the Lannisters against one another, became a major player in virtually every political situation, and it all led to him begging for mercy before having his throat slit. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you can't kill off Littlefinger. I'm just saying the way they chose to do it, from the writing, acting, and character motivations and justifications, was completely wrong in almost every conceivable way. Number 2. Season 7 build-up. So as I mentioned, Littlefinger did almost nothing in Season 7 other than die. He stood around, smirked, gave Bran the dagger that nearly killed him, and then Arya cut his throat with that same dagger. I'm guessing the writers thought that Littlefinger dying by his own dagger was some sort of cosmic justice or great irony, and in a better scene it might have been. Here it was just another detail to make the whole thing even more stupid. Throughout Season 7, it is established that Littlefinger is scheming to turn Sansa and Arya against each other. Arya apparently senses this and plays right into the trap by acting like an emotionless psychopath at every opportunity. Littlefinger then attempts to solidify his alliance with the Starks by giving Bran the dagger that was used on the attempt on his life. Bran then tells Littlefinger that
chaos is a ladder,
in a callback to the famous scene between Littlefinger and Varys in Season 3.
Chaos is a ladder.
This is Bran's way of telling Littlefinger that he has seen things in the past, or at least has information on what Littlefinger has been up to. Littlefinger simply stares at him with a look of concern, but does nothing. Despite the fact that the concept of these powers would be completely foreign to Littlefinger, I believe he would have done one of two things. Number 1. He either would have killed Bran right then and there, and then framed the murder on someone else. It would have been rather ironic for Bran to go through all that he has gone through, only to be killed in his room with the same dagger that was used in the attempt on his life back in episode 2. It would have been a much crueler but more fitting irony than the one that befell Littlefinger in the finale. Number 2. He would have calmly left the room and immediately left Winterfell, returned to the Vale and the safety of the Eyrie. I don't believe for a second that Littlefinger would have just hung around playing useless games with Sansa and Arya only to be killed. Number 3. The trial of Petyr Baelish. So let's fast forward to the scene in question. After a season of pointlessly attempting to turn Sansa against Arya and vice versa, Sansa summons Arya to the hall. The room is filled with Stark and Vale guards. Arya looks around and asks if Sansa really wants to do this.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Sansa claims that the charges are murder and treason. Then, in a swerve pulled straight out of a badly written wrestling storyline, Sansa asks how Littlefinger pleads, revealing the whole thing as a ruse.
Lord Baelish.
You know, maybe he tells his kids to get ready for school and then takes him to the dentist. It's a swerve.
Arya looks at him smugly as if they've pulled off an ingenious trap. Sansa then breaks down the charges. The first, the murder of her aunt, Lysa Arryn. Littlefinger says he did it to protect Sansa, and she claims he did it to take power in the Vale. The second charge, conspiracy to murder Jon Arryn by giving Lysa Arryn tears of Lys to poison him. Littlefinger claims Lysa was a troubled woman, implying she was simply making up stories. The third charge, that Littlefinger had Lysa send a letter to Ned and Catelyn Stark claiming the Lannisters murdered Jon Arryn, beginning the War of the Five Kings. Littlefinger claims he knows of no such letter. The fourth charge, Littlefinger conspired with Cersei Lannister and Joffrey Baratheon to betray their father Ned Stark, which led to his execution on the false charge of treason. Littlefinger denies it, claiming no one was there to see what happened. Bran says he held a knife to Ned's throat and said,
You said I did warn you not to trust me.
Arya then says he told their mother the knife belonged to Tyrion Lannister, but that the knife was actually his. Littlefinger then tells Sansa that he has protected her. Sansa claims he sold her to the Boltons. Sansa then uses Littlefinger's own words against him by reciting the "I like to play a little game" speech. She asks what reason he would have for turning her against her sister. She claims that's what he has always done, turn family against family. Littlefinger asks for a chance to defend himself, and Sansa leans back, apparently ready to hear him out. Littlefinger then commands Jon Royce to return him safely back to the Eyrie as Lord Protector of the Vale. Royce declines. Littlefinger then drops to his knees and begs Sansa to spare him. He claims to have loved Catelyn since he was a boy, and Sansa retorts that he still betrayed her. He claims he loves Sansa more than anyone, and she counters that he still betrayed her. Sansa then thanks Littlefinger for his lessons, and then has Arya execute him by slitting his throat. It seems like Littlefinger walked right into Sansa and Arya's trap and paid for it with his life, right? Wrong. This scene is so contrived and terribly written, it is mind-boggling how it even made it to air. For starters, it is pretty clear the writers wanted to end the season with Littlefinger being killed, and they thought that a trial where he is accused and then executed for his many crimes throughout the series would be a fitting end. And while that's not inherently a bad idea, the execution, pardon the pun, was all off. To pull off a scene like this, the audience has to buy into the fact that Littlefinger had no rebuttal to the charges levied against him. When he asks for a chance to defend himself, he simply attempts to flee, and when that fails, he falls on his knees and begs for mercy. Go and rewatch that scene. He isn't even officially found guilty. Sansa just gives a nod and Arya kills him. Sansa had made up her mind ahead of time that she was going to kill him. So you might be asking, why bother even trying to defend himself? Well, because this is Littlefinger. Because he will say and do anything to try and survive. The do, in this case, was to get Jon Royce to take him back to the Eyrie, which didn't work. But there were other things he could have said and done to get himself out of this situation. Number 4. What Littlefinger should have done. The second option open to Littlefinger as far as doing something goes is to simply ask for a trial by combat. It would have been rather fitting since Littlefinger's scheming began decades ago when he challenged Ned's brother to a duel for Catelyn's hand in marriage. He vowed then to play the game a different way, but it would be fitting if all his scheming simply led back to the same predicament, like a circle that is doomed to repeat itself. So Littlefinger asks for a trial by combat, requests a Knight of the Vale, and the trial is postponed until the night can arrive. In the meantime, he sends word back to the Vale to his nephew Sweet Robin that mean cousin Sansa is threatening to kill him, and Sweet Robin sends word that the Vale army is to escort Littlefinger safely back to the Vale. Boom! Littlefinger is saved. Worst comes to the worst, Littlefinger chooses the best knight in the Vale to represent him on the battlefield and gets the fairest possible chance. But let's say Sansa follows her aunt's lead and says the trial must happen there and then. And let's say that everyone refuses to stand for Littlefinger, which would make sense given that no one likes him. And let's say Littlefinger is defeated in the trial and killed. It would still be a much more fitting end for the character than just being executed on his knees. He swore to never again play the game that way. But in the end, he dies because he was forced to play the game that way once again. But there is an even simpler and more logical thing Littlefinger could have done to try and save his ass. He could have argued his case. Number 5. What Littlefinger should have said. As I mentioned, Littlefinger asks for the chance to defend himself, and Sansa appears willing to listen. But then he doesn't defend himself. I think the point of this was to convey that he had no real answer. Either that, or he did and it was simply cut out of the show. Either way, there is definitely a case that Littlefinger could have made in his own defense. I was yelling it at the TV as this scene was taking place. In response to the first charge that he murdered Lysa Arryn, Littlefinger responds that he did it to save Sansa. This was quite possibly the worst thing he could have said, other than simply laugh, say he did it, and then dance a merry Irish jig. Instead, he should have said, "Your Aunt Lysa killed herself. She threw herself through the moon door out of jealousy of the bond you and I share, by your own testimony." If Sansa tried to say that she was lying to protect Littlefinger, he could respond, "And why would you do that? She was your aunt. If I murdered her, why would you want to protect me? You say you were lying then, but how can we be sure? Were you lying then, or are you lying now?" In response to the second charge that he conspired to murder Jon Arryn by giving Lysa tears of Lys to poison him with, Littlefinger can simply say, "It's not true. It didn't happen. And what evidence do you have to say that it did?" Sansa and Arya and Bran can then argue until they are blue in the face that Bran has the powers of the three-eyed raven and has used them to see everything that has happened, but that is not evidence. Littlefinger, if he would even need to at that point, could simply say, "What is more likely, that a crippled boy has psychic powers and abilities that allow him to see everything, and he apparently saw me give Lysa Arryn poison to kill her husband with, so we could be together? Or that an elderly man should pass away in the night?" In response to the third charge, that Littlefinger had Lysa send a letter to the Starks claiming the Lannisters had murdered Jon Arryn, Catelyn burned the letter, so there is no evidence.
What news?
Yet even if there was, the letter was from Lysa, not Littlefinger. Littlefinger claims he knows nothing of the letter. This information was once again obviously supplied by Bran, which can again be easily discredited. In response to the fourth charge, that Littlefinger conspired with Cersei Lannister and Joffrey Baratheon to betray Ned Stark, which led to his execution, Littlefinger claims no one was there to see what happened, which leads Bran to claim he saw it by relaying Littlefinger's line back to him.
You said I did warn you not to trust me.
Littlefinger can actually use the truth here to pretty much exonerate himself. All he needs to say is, "Your father was attempting to overthrow the king. We may not have liked Joffrey. In fact, I helped you escape his grip. But he was the king nonetheless. I advised your father not to go at it half-assed. He should have stayed out of the fray and let Stannis come and remove Joffrey from the throne. When your father attempted his coup, I sided with the king, yes, as any sane man would. As for the false charge of treason that resulted in his execution, Lady Sansa, you were there that day. Your father, by his own admission, was guilty of the charge. Maybe he was lying in an attempt to save his life, although that sounds quite unlike the Honorable Ned Stark I knew. But either way, he publicly admitted it, and Joffrey, not I, took his head.
He does these impersonations. I swear you would think it was the real people.
To Arya's claim that he lied to their mother about the dagger being Tyrion's when it was actually his, that is simply not true. He told Catelyn that the dagger was his, but that he lost it to Tyrion in a bet. To Sansa's claim that he sold her to the Boltons, Littlefinger should have responded with, "They were the Wardens of the North. I gave you to them for protection. I was summoned by Cersei to King's Landing, and I couldn't very well take you with me. I gave you to the Boltons because I thought you'd be safe at home in Winterfell. I knew nothing of what they were like, or what they would do to you. And when you waged war with them, when you needed help to win that war, I sent the Vale army to be by your side." After all that, Sansa may still have chosen to execute him, but at least he wouldn't have seemed like such a colossal moron on the way out. Number 6. Oh yeah, one other thing that Littlefinger could have done. Before I forget, there is one other thing Littlefinger could have done to try and save his life. He could have asked to take the Black and head to the Wall to live out his days as a man of the Night's Watch. There he could have schemed and plotted to get back all he had lost. Which is something Sansa would have likely known and thus denied him his request, but it would have been worth asking rather than just waiting to get your throat cut. Also, given that Sansa knows how serious a threat the Night's King and the army of the dead are, Littlefinger's scheming and cunning might have come in handy against them. Maybe not. In fact, now that the Night's King has a fucking ice dragon, probably not. But she doesn't know that. And either way, Littlefinger is probably more valuable alive than dead. Once again, Sansa may still have decided to just kill him, since this was more of a fast trial as an excuse for murdering a lord in cold blood. To say nothing of the breaking of guest rights, which is how Sansa and Arya's mother and brother were killed during the Red Wedding. Regardless, Littlefinger probably should have still tried. And that's why this scene is so terrible, because Littlefinger would have tried. He's Littlefinger. His whole gimmick is that he is scheming and plotting. That's why this is so out of character. Littlefinger just wouldn't do that. I don't buy it for 1 second. If I was in that situation, I would at least argue my case, or at least ask for a trial by combat, or ask to take the Black, anything to stay alive. If I know deep down that I would do that, then I know for sure that Littlefinger would. Because if I know anything about Littlefinger, it's that when the chips are down, he will do whatever it takes to keep breathing. But he didn't. Number 7. The aftermath. After Littlefinger is killed, we get one final scene between Sansa and Arya. Basically, Sansa says she's sorry for not thinking Arya was a big enough badass, and Arya says she's sorry for being a creepy, weird psychopath this whole season. They recite some corny poster taglines.
And the snows fall and the white winds blow. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives.
And then Arya recognizes Sansa as the Lady of Winterfell. Then they argue over who killed Littlefinger, with Sansa saying Arya did it, and then Arya claiming that she was only the executioner, that Sansa passed the sentence.
You did the right thing.
You did it.
I'm just the executioner. You pass the sentence.
Which is quite possibly the worst butchering of a callback in the show's history. They give one giant middle finger to their own father's motto, and it's curtains on this story for Season 7.
The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword.
And no, the fact that Ned only said this to Bran doesn't negate the message, and it doesn't provide an out. The intent with that scene was to get across that Ned is honourable, and that honour is not negotiable. It is contrasted at the end of the season when the dishonourable Joffrey sentences Ned to die, but has Sir Ilyn swing the sword. So even though he might not have told his daughters that, to use that argument is to take the most literal interpretation of the text as possible. Yes, he may not have told them, but the message was that he instills this in his children as a sense of duty and honour. We didn't see a scene of Ned teaching his kids not to stick their heads in the fire, but they don't do it, do they? And also, Bran is capable of relaying things that happened decades before he was born. I'm pretty sure he could relay his father's feelings towards sentencing and execution, given that he was actually there for that memory. Number 8. Aiden Gillen deserved better. Aiden Gillen is a great actor. He was great on The Wire.
I still wake up white in a city that ain't.
He was great on Game of Thrones.
Chaos is a ladder.
And he's usually pretty great in any of the schlock he's in. I mentioned at the beginning that the acting was awful in the Littlefinger trial scene, and it was. Sophie Turner was playing Sansa like a woman getting her revenge, not a noble lady handing out justice. Although to be fair to her, that seems to be the way it was written. Maisie Williams continues to flip-flop between playing the Arya of old, like in the scene with Hot Pie, or with Ed Sheeran, or the cold, emotionless psychopath like in this scene. Whilst the latter, she seems to play the character almost smug, far too self-assured, which is odd considering that at the end of her time in Braavos, her arrogance nearly cost her her life. It's almost like Arya hasn't learned anything. Like her character hasn't grown at all because these aren't characters anymore. They're names and faces that people like, so they are now perfect and immune to vulnerability, and therefore have no need to change, which is the complete antithesis of the original concept of the story. Again, I can't really blame the actress here. It's much more likely the writers and directors that instructed her to play the scene smug and emotionless. But nonetheless, her acting in this scene just didn't work. It probably wasn't their fault, but they were downright bad. And then there's Aiden Gillen. Even when tasked with making such a ridiculous scene work, even when acting in his final scene in the series in such a poorly written and laughably bad scene, he puts on a performance that puts the other actors in the series to shame. And I don't think he's even really been trying since about season 3. But he still does a great job. He deserved better, and so did the audience. Number 9. The implications of the scene. The scene, like much of the season with many characters, whether it was the writer's intention or not, leaves us with several characters that we are supposed to root for, despite the fact that they have done horrendous things. And the weird thing is, I don't think this is by design. This isn't like the redemption story of Jaime in season 3, or the redemption of Theon, or even the scene just before the fall of Theon, where he explains what it's like to be constantly told he should be grateful for being a prisoner of the Starks.
Yes, my captors were so very kind to me. You love reminding me of that. Everyone in this frozen pile of shit has always loved reminding me of that. You know what it's like to be told how lucky you are to be someone's prisoner? To be told how much you owe them.
Those were powerful scenes that coloured characters in a different light. It was great writing and great acting. Dany burning the Tarleys to death and Sansa and Arya killing Littlefinger isn't that. The show isn't taking otherwise decent people and having them do something morally questionable to make you reconsider your opinion on them. If they were, that would be something interesting. They've done it the other way, by taking unlikable characters and redeeming them. To take a likable character and put their character into question would be interesting. But that's not what this is. The show thinks that Littlefinger's execution was justice. They want you to think he deserved it, and that Sansa and Arya were right to take their revenge. And they threw in Bran's abilities to make it seem like they had a concrete case. But that's the thing. They didn't. Sansa and Arya didn't trick Littlefinger. They didn't beat him at his own game. They used an omniscient entity, who also happened to be their brother, to try him for crimes they couldn't prove he committed. They only beat him because the writers wrote him to be an idiot. Number 10. What the writers should have done. If the writers wanted Sansa to get one over on Littlefinger and have Littlefinger die by the end of the season, they should have had Sansa play Littlefinger at his own game from the beginning of the season. Have Littlefinger begin a power play by suggesting something to Sansa. Say that, as a show of gratitude to the Vale, Sansa should marry Sweet Robin. This could be the beginning of Littlefinger's play to take control of Winterfell. Instead of playing Sansa against Arya, he could begin to play Sansa against Jon. Arya even implied several times this season that Sansa wanted to be Lady of Winterfell, or Queen in the North. Instead, have Littlefinger begin to poison Sansa's mind against Jon. Littlefinger could even return to the Vale, and Sansa could meet with him during negotiations to marry Sweet Robin. During these negotiations, Littlefinger and Sansa meet privately to discuss plans. Littlefinger makes a play for Sansa once again, since his only weakness is his infatuation with Catelyn and now Sansa. Have her rebuff him. Later in the season, Sansa schedules a meeting with him, again to negotiate the marriage between her and Sweet Robin. Littlefinger again attempts to confess his love for Sansa and win her over. She again rebuffs him, asking what Robin would do if he found out. Littlefinger says he will take care of Robin. In the season finale, Littlefinger arrives at what he thinks is the wedding ceremony of Sansa and Robin, only to discover it is actually his trial. Sansa reveals that he saw his play for Winterfell the second he tried to poison her against Jon. She can reveal that after his first attempt to win her affections, she knew he would try again, and so she arranged the meeting with Robin listening in the next room, or the cupboard. Littlefinger is to be given a trial, and since he knows how Moondor happy Robin is, and out of options, he is forced into a trial by combat. Jon could then have arrived for his sister's wedding, having borrowed a dragon for the afternoon or something, and Littlefinger's demise could come at the hands of a Stark during a duel, bringing things full circle. Or better yet, it could be revealed that Littlefinger was playing an even bigger con, and that he had long since poisoned Robin's mind against Sansa, and that he had sensed that Sansa was onto him, and told Robin ahead of time that Sansa would try to kill Littlefinger, and once Littlefinger was gone, there would be no one to protect Robin. Littlefinger could then have Sansa led away to the Sky Cells. He could then write a letter for Jon telling him that Sansa is planning to wed Robin in the Vale, and that she requests his attendance, implying that he is setting a trap for Jon in an attempt to capture Winterfell for himself in the final season. I'd do something like that, instead of this. I mean seriously, Littlefinger just dying in some completely innocuous and banal manner would have been better than this. Like him eating a Snickers bar and dying of a peanut allergy would have been better. Number 11. That's it. That's it. That's all I have to say on this insulting fucking scene that ruined one of the most complicated and interesting characters in the entire series. I can't wait until next season when they have Theon betray everyone again to side with the Night King, and have Jaime rape Tyrion because it's been a few minutes since they went back on his story arc. Well, thank you for watching. If you didn't before, I hope now you understand why I and many others hated this fucking scene.